restricted by the chair. Our first item today was an item that was continued from the administrative hearing of January 25th, 2016, and that is to approve a grant agreement between Mesa County government and the State of Colorado Department of Public Safety, Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management in the amount of $287,391 for the Bosley Wash Detention Pond Project, and authorize the chair to sign. And we have Carrie Gudorf and Julie Constant here today to present that item. Thank you.
Good morning. This grant is, we're looking to get this grant approved for $2.8 million that will assist with removing approximately 200 homes that are impacted every time it rains, and including agriculture properties along the Bosley Wash watershed. Detaining this stormwater will help protect lives and property in severe rain events. We've been watching Bosley Wash for several years, and it's continually a problem, and was a result of a death back in 2006.
Thank you, Carrie. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Carrie or Julie?
No.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this item? Kevin, come on up. Kevin, just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Kevin King, 639 Panorama, Mesa County. Again, thank you guys for allowing me before the throne. I think we'll probably see a day come that this might not be allowed. As I had asked 2 weeks ago, thankfully we had some snow events that gave me a little bit of extra time to do some more research. And pretty intriguing information I'm going to share here publicly today. So I'll probably need maybe the full 10 minutes. So this whole grant that's being requested for $2.8 million stems back from a 2002 report that I located that was done, I'll pull it up here and look at it, but regardless, there were 4 alternatives that were presented back in 2002. 2006 comes along and we have supposedly a rain event, and nowhere can I find over the historical parts of that, and I'll share those details with you here in a minute. But in the report of this death on I-70, it was an 86-year-old woman, and it was her husband, 84 years old, that drowned. No, it said may have caused, didn't say it was caused in that particular report. But what gets even more intriguing in Mesa County's recently passed and adopted mitigation plan, it only talks about damage in that area of $25,000 in the reports that I've looked at to 3 homes. So the estimates in this initial report are based on scientific proof over 100, something like 1,700 cubic feet per second, and I can't find that justification anywhere, but maybe it's somewhere you guys can help me with. But no federal declaration was ever made, ever, in this Bosley Wash that's supposedly so urgent to get $2.8 million. So now let's go back to the county mitigation plan that really is opening the door to get these FEMA grants, which is ironic because if you go back and look, this initial report talks about the Bureau of Reclamation stepping up for the funding, right? So nowhere in this grant is the Bureau of Reclamation even mentioned anymore. So it went from Bureau of Reclamation. Then in the county mitigation plan that was just adopted in 2015, it talks about the 521 Drainage District obtaining the funding. And now here we are today asking FEMA to give us money. And with this FEMA grant, it has, as we've talked about, all these compliances that should scare the heck out of us. But let's look at the scientific part of it. I looked up 1962 to 2016. It had maximum 24-hour precipitation events. Maximum. So in 2006 is what we're basing this whole thing on. It was, out of all those years, it was right in the middle of the pack as the 16th highest 24-hour rain total at 0.34 inches. Doesn't mean it was at the Bosley Wash area just means somewhere in Grand Junction. So again, I just don't see where accepting $2.8 million is justifying an event when we've had 15 other rain events over ½ inch, not causing deaths, not causing property damage. So also in the mitigation plan, we have since 1978 in these reports, a total of 33 flood claims in all of Mesa County, not the Bosley Wash area, for only $250,000 of paid insurance claims. So that equivalents to about $6,600 a year of insurance claims, and now we're wanting $2.8 million. And by the way, in the original 2002 report, that you're going with the worst case scenario. In that report, the recommended plan in 2002 was the least of all four at only $422,000 at that point in time. So my question is, why isn't this plan, why isn't that plan being implemented? Why is it the worst case scenario? The other part to this is in the county mitigation plan, it talks about cloudburst that cause these situations. And so that kind of made me go, well, what would cause a cloudburst over the Bosley Wash area? Well, lo and behold, we have a weather modification plan being used by the Colorado Water Conservancy Board that's supposedly helping with this federal grant. And so the question there is, are these 16 or whatever, however many cannons we have up on the Mesa shooting toxic silver iodide into the atmosphere that studies have shown will carry on for miles and miles and miles? And there's nothing in this grant documentation, not even here, that's even considering that as a potential that's causing these floods. It's not even in there. And why isn't it? It's intriguing. So when you go dig in, okay, well, who's controlling these weather modification programs? Well, apparently somebody at the City of Grand Junction, Mark Wittenberg or somebody, I think his name is, and he's on a authority called City of Grand Junction Weather Enhancement Authority. Now, if you go on the city website, you won't find it. Why is that a secret? Why is that so super secret? And they're controlling all these weather cannons up on the Mesa. So the question is the government creating the problem so they can come in and fix it? That's my question. So write that one down because I'd like to have an answer on that one. No annual maintenance budget in this grant. I can't find any language in there. It's just $2.8 million, but it's what comes with it that gets really disturbing. And it seems to fit the current climate change agenda of Mother Nature turned terrorist. So when you go to the loans and grants webpage, and I'll also say that a recent study had just been released, 97% of Americans don't even believe in climate change as being the top agenda in this country. I really don't even believe in global warming any longer. But here you are accepting a grant that 3% of our population agree with. So consider that in your vote. City of Grand Junction Hazard Mitigation Plan, Chapter 42.08. That one you can find. Again, no mention of weather modification. It does mention 521 Drainage Authority, and I don't know that I've heard them here to speak on behalf of this or why they're not obtaining the funding. So here we go into what comes with it. Well, Executive Order 12372, President Reagan of all people, right? Let's strengthen federalism. Why isn't that quaint? When you start seeing what's coming behind this, I think you guys should rethink your position strongly on a no vote here today. So ineligible activities is mentioned in the, and I sent you guys this email, in the final guidance from FEMA directly on page 30. it talks about ineligible activities. The very first one says, activities on federal lands or associated with facilities owned by another federal facility. And we're talking about 77 acres of some federal land, correct? Well, right there, it's ineligible to receive this grant money. So that's number one. The other original plan back from 2002 talked about, okay, if we really want to settle the issue, let's buy up 430. It was either 430 or 480. I couldn't read if it was 430 acres or 480. Let's buy it all up. Back in 2002, it only cost us a little over $3 million. And then there would be no more problems. It wouldn't be an issue. But here we are today. Now we have to comply with the following things after I mentioned a couple more of ineligible activities. Activities that only address man-made activities. Well, if we bring in the weather modification, wouldn't that be considered a man-made activity? And then thirdly, no, it can't be related to any kind of hazard cleanup within 2 miles. Well, have we tested the soils for the silver iodide and the other components that come with weather modification? Have we tested those in these soils? But here's where it gets really frustrating for me, is when I go read the grants and what we have to accept. And I think as conservative Republicans that you guys have run on in this county, it's everything against that when you accept this money. It's everything against that. You're signing up for President Obama's climate change agenda, which goes all the way to the UN agenda, and I sent you those languages where they're exactly intertwined, ICLEA, but all the things that come with it. So you have to instill the 2014 to 2018 FEMA strategic plan, sent that to you. The FEMA resilience and climate adaptation, that language is actually in your county ordinance or resolution. And it even mentions a 44 CFR, where now we're writing federal regulations right into our resolutions now. Scary, people, scary. FEMA climate change adaptation policy, the Stafford Act, the Patriot Act, which is why I probably would doubt I'll be here much longer if I continue to stand up against government overreach, the Davis-Bacon Act. Commissioner McGinnis, you spoke about that, but now we're basically supporting forced unionization by taking this grant money because we have to pay these higher wages. So I would just say this is everything's already been set up. These meetings have been going on, these mitigation plans, all following these exact FEMA directives. So commissioners, you're signing on today with a yes vote that you agree with climate change, you agree with global warming policies, you agree with President Obama's executive orders, and 100% in line with the current environmental extremist groups that 97% of the American people don't agree with. So today, decide how you vote, but your legacy will depend on how you vote on this particular grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this item? Andy, come on up.
Good morning. I'm Andy Martzoff, Mesa County Emergency Manager. The hazard mitigation plan for Mesa County does identify flooding as a high hazard, which means it's likely to occur every year. There are two mechanisms we typically see flooding. One is spring runoff flooding. The other is flash flooding. Bosley Wash is a flash flood issue. It ran twice late last summer. There has been loss of life due to flow on Bosley Wash. Bosley Wash is an unmitigated flash flood hazard that exists in Mesa County that has caused loss of life, and it threatens the potential loss of further life, destruction of property, transportation, infrastructure, and interstate commerce. So I think that we all know that mitigating natural hazards is a very expensive proposition. And we do put plans in place, such as the hazard mitigation plan, that allow us to be eligible to certain types of grant funding. And that this is where we have arrived with this. So to mitigate natural hazards, I believe, is an important role of government. It's a public safety issue. So from the standpoint of emergency preparedness, emergency management, and public safety, I would encourage you to move forward with the Bosley Wash mitigation project.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions? Commissioner McGinnis? Commissioner Dustman?
So when does this flash flooding usually occur? Is it in the spring, or is it early, or is it spring and then later in the monsoon in August perhaps, or?
This flash flooding in this area typically occurs in late summer with monsoonal flow. So heavy downpour activity right there on the face of the Book Cliffs, and it just flows off.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ma'am, yeah, come on up, please. Please just introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Kristen Wynn. I am a former City of Grand Junction employee, and the reason I'm speaking is because the gentleman who spoke about cloud seeding, the cloud seeding takes place in the winter. The city does cloud seeding to increase the amount of water that we have. Bosley Wash floods in the summer. So the silver iodide that we use for cloud seeding has nothing to do with Bosley Wash. I was working for the city when Bosley Wash flooded and went out to take some pictures. What happened was Bosley Wash and the destruction from that flood was pretty amazing. It's a flash flood situation. All that water came down from the Book Cliffs. It rains in the Book Cliffs, it floods and comes down running toward the river. That flow created mud across I-70. This elderly couple had no idea the road was flooding. They drove into it, their car flipped. The gentleman was caught in that and drowned. He was stuck in his seatbelt upside down in his vehicle. If we can prevent those types of deaths, any type of death from flash flooding, that is the role of government. I'm sorry, but we're not going to all be out there with picks and shovels trying to fix Bosley Wash. That is the role of government. And I firmly believe that this is something that needs to be done. It should have been done years ago. And if there's federal funding to do it, please accept it.
Thank you, Ms. Wynn. Kevin, are you coming back up?
Yeah. Okay, government. How many people are going to die in Mesa County today? How many? Somebody got an answer? 1,000? You going to save their lives today? I mean, where does the madness stop here? Let's admit here, you can't save every life. But to sell yourself out to all these federal agencies that we're asking to be just gone, to be gone as conservatives, you're lining them up at the front door. It's just crazy what we're doing here. So it's like we might as well just go completely communist, in my opinion, and nationalize everything, because that's where this is heading. It gets even more disturbing than that, but honestly, if we start talking about deaths and weather modification, it gets really ugly with what the bigger agenda is, but there's probably too much for people to handle here today. So, again, I urge you to say no.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, hold on. Commissioner McGinnis had a question for you.
Kevin, I appreciate your concern. You put a lot of work in this, but I'm trying to follow your logic. So if we were to follow your logic, and you're welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, let me just list the areas we get federal grants or state grants, and all of these grants have stipulations with them. Let me just go down the list. Davis-Bacon. So your schools, your libraries, state highway projects, federal highway projects, water projects, irrigation projects, farm projects. So these are just, yeah, we'll get to that one in just a minute. So here's a whole, I'm going to go through this list. We follow your philosophy, we shut the valve off on all of these. And I want you, if you can, tell me, if you were in our shoes, how do you serve these people, Kevin? How do we tell them? And how many people a day do we save? So we can't save them all, so maybe we ought to cut a couple of ambulances out because we get federal funding from emergency assistance? Let me go down the list. A hospital. My gosh, our hospitals, we have to take, there's Medicaid money out there, there's Medicare money out there, there's federal regulations on the cleanliness, there's federal regulations on the certifications of doctors, there's federal regulations on the ambulance drivers. It's everywhere. Should we just say we're not going to comply with any of those, shut down the hospitals? Let's go on. The schools, school lunch program. It's outrageous. I happen to agree with you. We have more people employed in Washington, D.C. I mean, it's a massive building just to plan our school lunches, but it's the fact. That's the school lunch. We have all kinds of regulations. Stop school lunches, stop all of the different certifications, all those kind of things, and the list goes on. The water, the drainage, food, going to the grocery store. Look at all the regulations that we have, most of which are federal. Federal safety, meat inspectors, food inspectors, electricity. And by the way, you're the beneficiary of all these, and I guess in the purest form, following your logic, you probably don't use highways, don't buy gasoline, don't go to the hospital, don't send your kids to the schools, public or private. Yeah, you know where I'm
You know
going.
what that just sounded like right there, Commissioner
Let me-
McGinnis? It sounded like President Obama saying,
Oh, come on.
we build the roads, and that's exactly what that's what you're saying right now.
Let me just finish. So our oil and gas regulation, I mean, the regulations go on and on. So here's how I do it. So when we look at projects like this, which is, and your input last week I thought was valuable. So we have the legal department look at it and say, look, is there anything unusual? Is there a red flag in here? Versus not taking the funds. Some of the points you brought up. So we get a report there. We talk to the engineers who are experts on Bosley Wash. We talk to the emergency management. And in my opinion, that you take a look at these grants, and so it comes to the question, okay, refuse the grant, how are we going to fix it? So kind of answer some of those for me. Tell me where you draw the line on accepting funds to assist the citizens of this county.
I think I've been very clear on that. I'm trying to protect the future generations here, and we've sold out to the psychopaths and the criminals in Washington, D.C., is what you just admitted to, Commissioner McGinnis. And I'm sitting there saying, enough of that's enough, right? Our economy is crapola right now in this. And this is because you've accepted all these unfunded mandates. So let's talk about those. We have to comply with all these new things now, because every time you take a federal grant money, now we have to do all these additional things. We need 20 more county administrators. Can you see it's a redistribution model that's being applied? And you've agreed, Commissioner McGinnis. It should be the other way around, right? You've agreed with me on
Not
multiple
answering my
times.
question, Kevin. My question is, and I'm not going to go on a debate with you, but my question is, tell me what you're going to shut down. Should we shut down the airport tomorrow? Heavy in federal grants. Heavy in federal grants.
Hey, if it can't be sustained, then it probably, I can't run a business.
We can't sustain
Right.
it without federal grants. Should we shut the airport tomorrow,
Well,
Kevin?
I think it's a whole little switch there, Commissioner.
How about the hospital?
Right? It should be a trickle up, not a trickle down.
Yeah, how about- so-
There's the answer that you're looking for. We shouldn't just have them come in here, take all our money, the majority of it, and trickle it back through jobs. That's what's going on
Reality of
right
today,
now.
based on what you're saying.
It's a redistribution model.
Okay, so in other words, you won't close the airport tomorrow, right? You'd agree with me, we're not going to close the airport tomorrow. We're not going to close the hospital tomorrow. And I think that as these different things come in, where we have needs and where we have obligations to protect our citizens, as we just heard, we have to balance those out. So I think that's the responsibility we have. Some of them, I think, the burden's too much. The trade-off, the balance isn't there. But to draw a blank statement across the board that we should accept no federal funding, much of which you are a beneficiary of directly, you directly are a beneficiary, as am I, by the way.
On this one particular, how am I a beneficiary? Because I
Well,
travel I-70?
No. I'm talking about when we take it, if we take the broad brush that you're recommending. If we're going to start doing this, if this county commission is from this point on going to take the position, no federal grants, no state assistance, anything the county government touches, no outside funding.
Well, yeah, I would just say does anybody research it like I have? I have to admit, I haven't started studying these federal grants for the last 6 years or so, but what if there were multiple Kevin Kings out there that did and actually objected, maybe we wouldn't be in the predicaments we are today. But, hopefully, moving forward for future generations, which is what we're all here hopefully to be protecting, it just gets back to my original point, is if we're going to just allow the federal government to just walk in here, and that's why they come in here so arrogantly, because we comply. Why do you think they put all the compliances in the grants? Because we have local control. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to do what they're saying.
Oh, I agree with you that I think the research is very helpful, and I do think your point about looking at the different grants, and I think there are some grants that we shouldn't take with the stipulations.
And that's all I'm saying on this one, is this is one of those.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Any questions, Commissioner Justman?
Obviously, we have a lot of work to do with our representatives, and have you contacted our national representatives, each and every one of them, and tell them to look at this stuff and try to help us out?
It sounds like they're right here today, right?
Yeah, but we don't write the rules in Washington.
Say that again?
We don't write the rules in Washington. Our representatives do, and we probably all have been negligent in telling them what we need out here. We've talked about it, I've talked to Congressman Tipton. He's sympathetic, but he's got to have he's one of 435, and he needs some help there to get rid of some of this federal policy. You can look at the state of Colorado we're way off base here.
No, I understand, but Commissioner Justman, I send emails to you guys, and the only one I hear back from is Commissioner Puglisi. So who am I supposed to go to next? You guys probably have a better opportunity to go get a hold of Scott Tipton than I do, or anybody else for that
in
matter.
the phone book. I don't know what to tell
Yeah,
you.
he won't call back either.
Okay, thank you. Carrie and Julie, can you just answer one question on the 521 and its role and why this is something the county is doing and not the 521, please?
Mesa County has been a partner of the 521. We were one of the forming founders of the 521 back in 2004. And as a partner of 521, and the fact that 521 doesn't have a stormwater utility fee, the 521 does not have any taxing authority, the 521 receives all of its funding from contributions from its contracting parties, and we're one of the contracting parties. So that is why 521 is not the one coming forward with this grant application, because 521 does not have the funding to support it and back it, where Mesa County does have that funding.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience like to speak on this item? Kevin, come on up. Just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Kevin McCarney, 525 Arrow Court in Clifton, and I'm going to come at this at a little bit more of a scientific question, in that the event that happened in 2006, was that a 50-year event, 100-year event, 250-year, 500-year event? Floodplains in general are going to have definitions for events that happen on them. I happen to come from the Midwest, an area full of flooding problems, which we saw at Christmas time when I was there. They built a new levee in one of those towns. The flood this year came within 6 inches of topping a levee that's supposed to handle a 1,000-year event. When you're going to spend money on a mitigation project like this, you need to know how frequent that event of that size is in that flood mitigation zone to decide whether you're going to build mitigation, because we're talking about controlling the water there somewhere. Okay, the amount of flow that is going through that wash needs to be controlled somewhere to protect other assets, is what we're talking about. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, what year event was it? Was it a 100-year event? Is it going to happen every 100 years? Is it going to happen every 500 years? Is it going to happen every 1,000 years? You need to know that. You need to know how frequent that event is happening in that wash. And then you need to know why people were allowed to build in that area in the first place. Again, going back to the flood of '93, the federal government finally got smart after rebuilding the town of Valmeyer, Illinois 5 times in about 10 years, and said, guess what? We'll rebuild, but it's going to be up on top of the bluff, not down in the floodplain, because we're tired of paying for your house every 3 or 4 years. That's the type of decision you're faced with here. How frequently does it flood, and why was development allowed in that area in the first place?
Kevin, it flooded twice within 60 days last summer, I believe.
Again, the severity of the flood, John. We're talking
Just
about,
telling you,
did it go up over the highway?
reality. I mean, this lady
Did it
contacted
go up
us.
over the highway, John? Well, that's what we have to talk about. You're basing it on a 2006 flood, which could be
No.
a 200, 500,000-year event.
We must have
Okay.
had a 1,000-year event twice last summer then.
Flooding versus major flooding, John, there are different types of floods. It floods every time it rains in certain places because that's where the water goes. You've got to know how frequent something like 2006 happens to understand what type of mitigation you need to put in there. That's the question I'm asking. What year event was it? Was it because it floods in the Wash every time it rains. It floods in Clifton every time it rains. Okay? I don't see millions of dollars going to mitigate the Front Street problem in Clifton, right? And there are a lot more houses in there and businesses in there. You're talking about an event that happened in 2006 being the basis of what we're doing now. And I'm asking the severity level of that flood. Was that a 50-year flood, 100-year flood, 250-year flood, 500-year flood? All flood areas have those definitions, and that's what prevents people from building in them now. Can't get flood insurance in a floodplain because you're going to flood. Makes sense, right? Instead of rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding and wasting millions of dollars, we need to know what kind of event it was first, and that's where your engineers, but specifically your water engineers, need to know what type of event that was. That's my question. Was it a 50-year event? Does every time it rains in Bosley Wash, does mud flow over I-70 and wipe cars off the road? Okay? You're saying it did that twice last year. I don't recall mud being up over I-70 last year and washing cars off the road.
I don't know, but the one house over there, I have pictures and contacts that's on the, right by end of Bosley Wash.
I understand
They
that, John.
flooded out twice, and it was either 30 or 60-day time.
And I understand that. My question is, one, those events occur every summer. That's what you're saying. The severity
It
of
don't
it,
occur every summer, but it occurred last summer.
if there's rain in the Bosley Wash, it's going to flood, John. And that wash is going to wash down to where that house is because they're right at the end of the wash. That's,
And in addition to how many houses below it.
and that's my question is, why were they allowed to build there in the first place?
That's a good question, but
One, two,
if we eliminated housing from every place where it floods once in a while, we'd be all living on top of the Grand Mesa, I
no, we
guess.
wouldn't. You're incorrect. My question, and you're not answering it, is what type of event was the 2006 event, which is what we're basing this grant money and spending this money on? You can't answer that for me. Somebody has to have that answer. Okay?
It floods at Mesa Mall. Guess we're going to have to tell them to move.
Okay, Kevin, I think you asked a legitimate question, and we'll have our engineers who are experts because we clearly aren't
Right.
answering.
That's what I'm saying. Every flood area has specific information about it that is based on the science. Okay? We're not talking about mumbo jumbo here. Real science of a storm passes over this area and it rains this amount and you get this amount of flood and it happens this number of times, and that's what they base the 50-year floodplain, the 100-year floodplain, the 250-year floodplain, 500-year floodplain. Doesn't mean that it's not going to happen every 10 years. The flood that happened this year in St. Louis along the Merrimack River was an exact duplicate of 30 years ago when I was in college. The only difference that
Isn't even
saved
500
houses.
years ago.
That's what I'm saying, but it was based on a 500-year flood, okay? That's why I'm asking the question. The money you're spending, what is it based on? A scientific evaluation of that area. This happens every 10 years. Then we need to spend the money. It happens every 150, 250, 300. Then it becomes a question of, do you really need to spend that money or not?
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Kevin, I'm trying to wrap up. Is there anything?
I wanted to make sure I got this on record because we're talking about the health and safety of the community. So I just real quick wanted to, 5 lines. Promise you it won't take long.
Okay,
Thank you.
real quick.
So, emergency overview for silver iodide hazard identification. Caution, light sensitive, the toxicological properties of this material have not been fully investigated. May cause eye and skin irritation, may cause reproductive and fetal effects, may cause respiratory and digestive tract irritation. Target organs are the thyroid. How many thyroid problems we got in Mesa County? Eyes may cause eye irritation, may cause skin irritation, can cause eczema and rash, may cause irritation of the digestive tract. The toxicological properties of this substance have not been fully investigated. Chronic ingestion of iodides during pregnancy has resulted in fetal death, severe goiter, and cretoid appearance of the newborn. may cause respiratory tract irritation, may cause effects similar to those described for ingestion. The toxicological properties of this substance have not been fully investigated. Chronic inhalation or ingestion of silver salts may cause agruria characterized by a permanent blue-gray discoloration of the eyes, skin, mucous membranes, and internal organs. This malady results from the severe goiter and chronotoid appearance of the newborn. Prolonged exposure to iodides may produce iodism in sensitive individuals. Symptoms could include skin rash, runny nose, and headaches. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Carrie or Julie, could you just answer Mr. McCarney's question regarding the frequency of the flooding, please?
I'd have to go back and review the hydrological report that was completed, but we believe that that was most likely at least a 25-year event. The detention pond that's proposed will contain the 100-year flood event, but we have studies that have been completed will show the damage that will occur in Bosley Wash.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else that wants to talk about this item? All right, I'm going to close the public comment section and bring it back here for board discussion. I don't know. Commissioner McGinnis, you start.
Well, I think that, first of all, the exchange I had with Kevin, I think, is constructive. I appreciate the research he's done into it, but the reality of it is I'm having dealt at the state, federal, and now the county level. They are intertwined. It does require research. You do have to be very careful when you deal with the federal government, but in a lot of regards, we don't have any choice. We have to deal with the federal government on all those examples I gave you, and we can mention a lot more examples. And everybody in this room is, in part, the beneficiary of it. If we take the purest view, we won't buy gas, we won't take hospital services, we won't take education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So things that Kevin brought up, for example, on the weather modification, that's new information to me. I think it's interesting, and I intend to make an inquiry to the city to see exactly what they did for weather modification. I think they overdid it in the last few months, but
I think it's about right.
at any rate, find out a little more on that. So from my perspective as a county commissioner, you can't be everywhere at once. You have to depend on your experts. And we have a lot of expertise. We have a lot of great county employees. We have a lot of expertise in our landfill. I depend very heavily when we determine, and we have lots of federal regulations on our landfill out there. We cannot shut down our landfill, which could happen if we just decided we're not going to comply with those kind of things. We have expertise here. We have lots of expertise in our engineering department, and I give a lot of credit to the two engineers that we had up here. I've worked extensively with both of these individuals on a number of different issues, and have found their work and their representations above standard. We have our Department of Emergency Management. I may not have the exact name of the department. Our expert there. So kind of have to weigh this out. Flooding's a big issue. It's not an issue that some people may not worry about because they're not where a flood could happen. But we do this as a team. We look at our community. Our responsibilities as the county commissioners is, hey, if we can mitigate, granted, and I agree with Kevin, a 500-year event, and we're broke, I'm not sure, we have to assess what's the risk, what's the downfall, and so on. But this is not a 500-year event. Bosley Wash, and I've heard, when I ran for office, I heard a lot of people, especially out in the areas that were impacted, obviously, talk to me about, wonder why we're not doing anything about it. And I can assure you our phone rings a lot right after a flood event or even a heavy rainstorm. And so our job's to reach out there, figure out where's there a fix, get our expertise, which are the people that work. We all work for the people in this room and everybody out there. And when I came into office, I can tell you that one of the first positive impressions I had about our county were the people that work for this county. We have 1,000 of them, give or take. And so I intend to support this. I don't want to start us down this road where, because the federal government's got its fingers in it, and it's got stipulations, as they do in everything I mentioned to you, and that's just a small part of the list, that this Board of County Commissioners is just going to automatically say no. it's easy to say no, see what the consequences are the next day. And so for that reason, I think that we need to follow the expertise of our engineers, follow the expertise of our Department of Emergency Services, and frankly, not to exclude the testimony, but and I apologize if the lady, the individual that testified previously worked for the City of Grand Junction. I'm sorry, I missed the name.
Wynn. Ms. Wynn.
Mrs.
Wynn.
Ms. Wynn. I thought Ms. Wynn, now there's somebody that worked, was on the spot. I mean, she was on the field. She was there. She did some of this work. I found her testimony motivating. So I found all of it very interesting, but Bosley Wash is a problem. We don't have the funds. I just want all of you to know, as you've probably read the paper in the last few months, your county is financially challenged. This is not a project. If we don't get some assistance, we don't have the funding to do it on our own. We can't carry it on our own. And so for that reason and the testimony we've received, I intend to support the proposal.
Thank you, Commissioner McGinnis. Commissioner Justman.
I've been out to Bosley Wash personally last August about and looked at it, and it's a relatively large area that can flood when you get this rainfall or heavy rain on the book cliffs. Building a detention pond to control the water to quit the flooding is a choice that we have and that we have to do, as far as I'm concerned. You can watch TV. I don't know what the rest of the world does, whether it's St. Louis, Texas, or Phoenix. When they get these cloudbursts, they have these horrendous events. Are they going to close up the city of Phoenix and say you're in a floodplain and move it out? That's not going to happen. Can they build detention ponds? I don't know what they're going to do, but this is an opportunity for us to build a detention pond to protect, I don't know how many, is it 75 or 100 acres, Julie, approximately? Or it's a large area that floods. Bosley Wash itself is never going to handle all that water from off the book cliffs because it all funnels down to this choke point. And when I looked at it, we obviously need a detention pond. And we have to take some federal money to get the job done. I don't know what other choice we have other than do that. And like Scott said, we don't have $2 or $3 million in our budget to do a detention pond over here, a detention pond over there. We don't have millions of dollars to fix our own roads, so we take federal money. We also get federal mineral leasing grant dollars from DOLA to fix roads. So it's not the perfect world, but when the situation we're in, we have to take this opportunity when we can. And the people over there, that one lady, I know we got an email within 60 days, two of them, if not 30 days, what are you going to do? And I could see the water up on the side of her house, a foot or a foot and a half high. It was all dried up when we were there, but I thought Bosley Wash, I was expecting a wash as big as this room. It is about 4 foot deep and 8 foot wide maybe, and has all these choke points everywhere going down to the river about 2 miles. The most cost-effective way to control the water going into that Bosley Wash is with a detention pond. And when you cloud seed in December, I kind of fail to see how that's going to affect our weather in May, June, July, and August. None of that, they've been cloud seeding for about 40 years. That's it.
All right, thank you. I'm definitely torn on this issue. You know, we talk about the proper role of government, and that is infrastructure and public safety. I've been out since a lot of this area is in my district. Actually, I think most of it is in my district. Every time it floods, I go out there and get to see the destruction. You know, I don't know what the cost is, but I know every time I go out there, the people tell me that they elected me to protect their private property rights and don't think I'm doing a great job at doing that. And so I do trust the expertise of staff. I don't know enough about detention ponds or flooding to know what the causes are. Kevin King, you brought up some very disturbing information. And it's ironic, you know, we're always trying to find balance, and in the one respect we talk about fighting against federal overreach, and then the other respect we're taking federal money, and so how do we balance that? And all I kept thinking during this presentation is there any room, I mean, I know the budget really well, is there any room to fund this without taking the federal funds? And, because I do think this is an important project, I'm going to put that out there. This is an important project and it needs to be done. Now, the question is, do we do it with federal funds or can we do it on our own? And the unfortunate part is, I don't know what project, I mean, we've got so many projects that are just like this. I don't know what other projects we put on the side to come up with $2.8 million to do this. But I do think we need to do, I read through all of these grants, and Kevin King, I mean, you've done an amazing job opening my eyes to some of these restrictions that when I read these grants, I don't see. They don't jump out at me, but clearly I need to understand some of these grants a little bit better. I don't know where we find the money to do this project, and I do think the project's important. So, yeah, Commissioner McGinnis.
I have one comment.
Just one final point. Mr. King made the comment that he had emailed Mr. Justman and I, or all of us, I guess, and we hadn't responded. Fortunately, in today's technology, we can track all of that kind of thing. Mr. King, I do not recall, I mean, you may not have heard what you wanted to hear from me, but I don't recall receiving communication from you that was not acknowledged. Furthermore, I do recall specifically sending you communication, inviting you to sit down with me and talk about the governance on the drainage district and so on, and never received a response. Now, you may not have received it, but it wasn't kicked back, and this is probably 3-4 months ago. So for any of you that send communication to the board, if you don't hear from us, an acknowledgement of at least the receipt of it within 2 or 3 days, send it to us again. I'm not perfect. Maybe something got by me. I don't know, Kevin or Mr. King, but at any rate, if in the future you find that you're, for some reason, not receiving at least acknowledgement that we've received it, feel free to give us a call, and we'll look for it and make sure that we do, because it is the policy, and I think I can speak for the entire board, is the policy when we get correspondence or communication from our constituents that we review it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Justman.
This really doesn't pertain to our project today, but I've been sat in on an agricultural thing where in Kansas where they have a lot of hail damage. There was an organization there, and they videoed right out of the airplane as they flew into these really ugly formations and would seed those clouds to try and eliminate hail from affecting the farmers' crops. And one of those gentlemen that I watched in the presentation probably 10 or 15 years ago, not too many years after that, it got him. The storm was so severe that they didn't survive it, but that was some of the things that the state of Kansas was working on to try and control hail to kind of cut down on agricultural losses. And that was probably 15 years ago.
Thank you, Commissioner Justman. All right, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move approval of I've lost my place here, the grant agreement between Mesa County and the State Department of Public Safety, item I.1.
Is there a second? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.